A very good evening to you from the sports desk. Let's get into this conversation now. The Women with Disabilities in Sport seminar is working towards total inclusivity for women in sport. Now, the aim is to try and identify the challenges facing these athletes, but also to try and find workable solutions. Now, to talk to us about this seminar, we are joined by Futballing Girls founder and chairperson, Moonira Ramathula. Moonira, a very good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, and thank you very much for the invite.
Let's start, maybe before we talk about this seminar, tell us about Futballing Girls. I mean, what is it that it's not a football team, is it?
No. Oddly enough, I started the organization to try and get girls to play football and offer like free coaching and stuff like that. But as I got into it, I realized that, women in sport issues were complex, and that's how the organization just grew to incorporate the empowerment of women in sport on the whole.
So what exactly do you do if you're not a football team?
Oh, we do so much. We give equipment to girls' teams, which is rugby equipment, cricket equipment, when we have though, netball equipment and football equipment. We also do a literacy campaign for foundation phase. Just getting children to read, but with trying to create a synergy between sports and education. We run the biggest Women in Sports Awards in the country at the moment. I mean, we've just launched with the Limpopo Sport Confederation last year, the Limpopo Women in Sports Awards. We have the Gauteng Women in Sports Awards, which are divided into the 5 regions, and we have the provincial. We do leadership skills training for women in sport. There's so much, just creating visibility and voice platforms, a podcast for women in sport as well, just, highlighting achievements, and not just, women at the top, but even the women that are coming up.
You've always been quite passionate about sport, but specifically women issues.
Yes.
Why is that? What is driving you to be that passionate and to try and find that balance in women's sports?
I think for me it was, I started off as a soccer mom, and I got just thrown into the deep end and got so involved in football and football structures and stuff like that. But I think also for me was, with parents coming to me to say, how do our girls get involved? But also my experiences in the industry drove me to find, to try and drive change, to find some way to get towards equality for women in sport, and try and create a better environment for the next generation of women within the space.
And what are some of those issues that you face? And I know some of the seminars that you do address those issues, and we'll get to the seminar. But what are some of these things, issues that you address? I know you've done workshops and you constantly talk about these issues. But what would you say are the key issues that sort of hold back women in sports?
I think women in sport in this country in particular, well, not in particular in this country, but women in sport do experience a lot of bullying. And for me, the best way to deal with that was to ensure that I educated myself on what drives a certain organization, what is the constitution, how do you drive it, and I'm able to answer. So I concentrate a lot on that, on encouraging and empowering women on how to deal with being in the boardroom. How do you handle that? How do you handle being bullied? And sometimes the space might not be for you, but you can be passionate about something and drive it in a different direction and in a different way. Looking at female athletes, like the personal branding workshops that we run, we'll actually be running one in the Free State soon, is how do female athletes behave when it comes to dealing with media interviews, How do you conduct yourself, firstly, but also how do you conduct yourself as a brand? Because I think that's lacking, We want, and we talk a lot about saying we want female athletes to have sponsorship, but how do they then manage that aspect of it, that I'm now a brand and I'm representing a certain brand that's bigger than me. How do I deal with that? How do I conduct myself? And how do I get more leverage out of what I'm representing?
Are we seeing that change, though? I mean, if you look at Banyana, you look at Mamelodi Sundowns ladies, you look at the Proteas ladies doing well, the rugby, the Springboks, we're seeing a lot of difference. I mean, even beyond just the so-called bigger sports, there is some sort of paradigm shift, but one would say that's a little bit too slow, isn't it?
Yes, it is a bit slow, but let's not take away from how far it's come. I mean, looking at me, 13, 14 years ago when I got into the sport, at times I would be the only woman that's sitting there or the only woman within the space, and so many more have come in, but also so many more stronger who understand their role and understand what they're doing. But you also look at certain federations who are saying, look, I mean, you look at the launch of the Cricket League recently. That's amazing. I mean, the netball were then paid a salary towards, you know, them in preparation for the Netball World Cup, which is amazing. You know, it's good to see those changes because it's things that have never happened before. You look at how Hollywood Bets came in and they changed the whole landscape of the Women's National League, you know, not taking away from what Cecil has done, but like, you know, they've elevated it and brought it to a new level. So yes, there's great changes.
And we can actually see the end product of it all, with Banyana performing well at the World Cup. You realize, some of our girls playing at overseas clubs. I mean, you see the likes of Masarame getting deals in Spain, in America. And also, I mean, the world is starting to see this shift in terms of women's sports. I mean, just a couple of days ago, the Zambian football player who became the most expensive woman player in the world.
That is amazing.
From Zambia. So you can start to see that paradigm shift. But I want us to talk now about the summit that is happening this weekend. Tell us about that.
You know, I've always wanted to do something towards or looking at uplifting women in disability sport. And oddly enough, DJ and I would get into very heated and very deep discussions around it. Like, you know, how do we empower? Yes, there's so many variances and differences when you look at certain women within the disability sport sector. I mean, you know, how do they get sponsorship? How do they get to compete at world stages? And what are the challenges that they face? And sometimes it's simple challenges where they participate in venues that don't accommodate them from a facility point of view, you know. How do we then discuss those challenges and how do we move forward from there? So that's how the summit came about, where we want to have discussions around women in disability sport. I mean, you know, we're always talking women in sport, but somehow I feel we've neglected that aspect of it, and it's time for us to relate. But yeah, it is time for us to start having these discussions because they also have challenges and they might not be necessarily similar to what we are going through as the other women, but maybe they are, but they have deeper challenges, you know. They have challenges of funding, they have challenges of equipment, they have challenges of facilities, they have challenges of how do I get myself to a venue, how do I get myself to compete internationally so that I can then break an international record as well and then be further recognized.
I mean, I can tell you the many times that I've had personal conversations with KG Munjani about those sort of issues. But quickly, because we're running out of time, Moonira, in terms of the program itself on the 17th, what can we expect? The speakers, the topics?
Look, we've got great speakers. We've got Andri, who's coached women in disability sport for the longest time and produced good results internationally. We've got KG as well, you know, who will be talking about, you know, funding and sponsorship. We've got athletes themselves, you know, like your Simone, who's holding a world record for discus, you know, and we've got Dimakatsu, who's really battling to try and get funding to go internationally and compete so that she can bring herself to the next level. We've got Maria Combrink, who's no stranger in the disability sports sector. So we've got quite good speakers. You know, we've got a parent who's also a coach as well, who would give his perspective on, you know, how did it benefit his daughter and how does it benefit, you know, women with disabilities to participate in sport and to compete at, you know, these levels.
Who will be attending? I mean, who can attend this seminar?
Women who are within disability sport, coaches and administrators who are involved in disability sport as well.
And where do we go to find information around that?
Well, they can send us an email to projects@futballinggirls.co.za, or just on our Facebook page we have a click on a WhatsApp message and send us a message there and we'll make sure that you attend.
Moonira Ramathula, thank you very much for coming through to speak to us. Great work that you are doing in Women in Sports. And